As Ireland's largest career-focused society, the INE is delighted to welcome Jacqueline O'Donovan to join our speaker series. Jacqui is the managing director of O'Donovan Waste Management Company, a company that employs over 185 staff and revenues of over £20 million. Jacqui has been named PwC Private Businesswoman of the Year, Growing Business Awards Entrepreneur of the Year, and she is also a judge on the EY Entrepreneur of the Year Awards. Alongside her professional experience, Jacqui has been given the freedom of the City of London. She's been honoured by President Michael D. Higgins with a Presidential Distinguished Services Award for her continued support for the Irish community in the UK. So quite a resume you have there, Jacqui. So first of all, just thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule for facilitating this. So like as I said, a big part of our role as a society is kind of give students awareness of the kind of different pathways and different industries. Especially entrepreneurship is one that's very driven by the person themselves. So it's just getting different insights in different industries. So just basically before we get going, maybe if you just describe our audience, like who you were and what you do.
Okay, I suppose where I differ from other people, I didn't choose this job. This job chose me. So lost my father at the age of 17, and I'm the youngest of four, as you can see behind me. That is us when we were babies. So it was all hands to the pump. And my sister went off to have my niece, and I then became managing director at 19. Totally oblivious to the fact that I was in a male-dominated industry. So waste disposal in London is very heavily dominated by men, probably because it's quite a dirty industry. I suppose my biggest challenge at the age of 19 was I had to sign the lease for this office that we're in. So that was 10 years. So when you're 19, 10 years seems like a lifetime. So that was quite a challenge. The bank turned around and said, we're closing your accounts because none of the four of you are going to be as good as your father. So that was my first challenges. And then 36 years later, sitting in this chair, here I am.
Right, yeah. It's we have that saying, there's two types of entrepreneurs, those who kind of fall into it or those who plan it. Like how did that impact you, kind of being kind of thrown into it, or did you have much time to think about it? And like what was the transition like from just being a 17-year-old to within 2 years being a managing director of a significantly sized company?
I don't think I'm the type of person that gets on with the job. So I'm not one to sit there and think about, oh, will I or won't I, can I or can't I? I just sort of get on with things. I'm a doer. The job needed to be done. You know, my mum was 48 when my dad died. We thought she was ancient because we were so young, but obviously 48 is no age now. And it was a case of it was all hands to the pump, and all four of us are still here. Dad's dead 39 years this year, and we all still work harmoniously together. And it has to be a passion. I honestly couldn't do what I do if I didn't have a passion for it. So as much as I didn't choose it, it chose me. I've got an unrivaled passion for it. For the industry, for what I do, for what I create, everything about it.
And where do you think that kind of passion came from? Did you have a close relationship with your father, or even to a greater extent, kind of the Irish heritage and kind of your parents coming over from Ireland? Did that kind of have any impact on where you got it from?
Yeah, I think the fact that everybody, including my parents, particularly my dad's side of the family, looking at us, because Dad was the only one that actually emigrated from Ireland. All his brothers and sisters stayed in Ireland, so he was the only one. So I think back in the 50s when he came to England, it was always you couldn't go back unless you had something to go back to show for. So I think that was very evident. We didn't go anywhere, only home. And although I haven't got the Irish accent, I do call it home. we always went home for every single holiday that we had. So I think, yeah, I'm not going to lie, I was daddy's little girl. I went everywhere with my dad, albeit, you know, he died when I was 17, so I had a very short period of time with him. I was just out of school. I ran out of school telling them, 2 fingers to you, I don't need you. Obviously I've paid the price of that. I didn't get school. School didn't get me, I didn't get school. But now I'm in and have been in this position for 36 years. I get why things are the way they are. And I think it's over time. But yeah, I just absolutely love it. I could never do this job if I didn't love it, because no matter, you know, when people say, "Oh, should work-life balance," there is no work-life balance. It is, work is your life because you love it.
Yeah,
Entrepreneur.
like that. Yeah, that's very interesting. You know, even you're kind of considered as a pioneer of safety in your industry, and you're kind of put up there. And if everyone in the UK in your industry kind of knows who you are. When I'm doing my research, your name was everywhere, and you could go through thousands of pages through Google. But even just stemming back, when you were talking about leaving school, you kind of said you were going down the childminder route. Do you think that kind of, those characteristics and that mindset was helped you, or kind of gave you that vision to be that kind of person in safety?
No, I don't think it did. No, you mean the children were saved. Little did my dad know, bless him, that he was saving the children. So yeah, I was heading off to an RAF base in Germany to be a childminder. I've got one son, and thankfully he is my best day's work, and he was a fantastic baby, but it definitely wasn't going to be my career. Why I even thought about it, I don't know. I don't even know where the idea came in. I think it was probably the excitement of actually leaving England, going somewhere other than Ireland, that took me. But it literally was about 2 weeks, and then Dad had died. So then it was, right, go on, get in there. And I think the reason I'm the trailblazer and I'm the pioneer within my industry is that I'm the only female in London that does the job that I do. And I think we've only found possibly 3 of us in total in the UK, females in this industry, in this role. Now, I understand it's very dirty. It is a dirty industry. So I can understand women sort of coming into environmental jobs, surveying, and that type of role. But you know, waste sort of sits between logistics and construction. We sort of fall down the crack in the middle. It is very dirty. It is very rough and ready. But I was just born into it. You know, I've got diesel in my blood, is what the saying is. And I suppose my passion for my heritage comes from the fact that my mum and dad arrived here when it was no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. And that discrimination that they must have felt was enormous. And I think they probably went without an awful lot of things to bring us up. So the 6 of us lived in a 1-bedroom flat until I was 5. So you know, we've had very grounded upbringing from the very start. So I think that's had a massive impact on me. And I think it's really important that history is kept. So we recently funded the archives for the London Irish Centre in Camden Town to buy the archives of all the tapes, the videos, the recordings, the letters from a historian called Alton Cowley, so that history is kept and is remembered. It's very passionate. I'm very passionate about that my son understands what my parents went through to give us the life that we have. And likewise, what I do to give him the life that he has. And yeah, the passion, I think the passion is something you have or you don't have. If you're an entrepreneur and you start off on a project and you're not interested in it, you're never going to be interested in it. Nothing's going to make you interested in it. It's within you, I think.
Yeah, and that kind of the challenges that you overcame, it's probably hard to even imagine. You know, it was only International Women's Day yesterday, and a lot of work has been done, still a lot to go. But like how, even if Michael Jordan had this idea where he used to put something into his head that the other person would say something, bad about him to kind of get motivation from it. Was that motivation for you, just being 19, managing director of this very large company, having people over you? Was that motivation for you to kind of prove the naysayers wrong?
No, do you know what the motivation for me was? The bank manager. Because I was a female, because I was in a male-dominated industry, and because I didn't have an Irish accent, he discriminated against me, and it was as blatant as the nose on my face. And he put me through the ringer. You mean everything was hell to get anything, to do anything, to expand, to grow, because my dad was one of the biggest in the industry, so we had to completely shrink everything back down to a manageable size. So you mean I'm probably our first turnover was 175,000 for the year, you know, so we were very small. The two brothers were out driving lorries. So yeah, my biggest issue was my bank manager. He was the one that drove me to prove him that I knew what I was doing. And in the end, when I was just there, he decided to announce that he was retiring. So when he introduced me to the, you can imagine what I was thinking. So when he introduced me to the next bank manager, I said to him, done my time, I've done my L plates, I'm not doing it again. Ignore the blonde hair, ignore the fact that I'm a woman, just look at the numbers. And fair play, he did, he looked at the numbers and he supported me, and I've had nothing but support from the financial people going forward now, because obviously, you know, the numbers speak for themselves. It's irrelevant, the fact that it's a female driving it behind it, the numbers speak for themselves. And I think that's quite an important thing for people to remember, that it's irrelevant who's behind the numbers, but if the numbers are going up and up and up and the percentages are going up and up and up, it's success, and that's what success looks like.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the motto. Like, if the numbers are there, there's no way you'd be a fool not to go with them. And you talk about the kind of growth strategy that you kind of, in your early days, you were struggling with the financing, but how, like, one of the problems a lot of entrepreneurs have is actually achieving sustainable growth. The first year to second year, they have that initial growth and a lot of them stagnate. How did you approach your growth strategy in kind of a very capital intensive industry with trucks that are quite expensive, even in staff would be hired in, would need to be trained and skilled?
Yeah, so I suppose I looked at it completely different, and I still look at it completely different to how my male counterparts look at it. So first thing I looked at was health and safety. So the health and safety in our industry is next to agriculture, which is, you know, nothing to be proud of at all. So I started looking at the health and safety. So then it's like, well, how can I expect people to improve health and safety if I don't know how to improve it myself? So I went off and I got a diploma in health and safety, a NEBOSH diploma in health and safety. So I'm a qualified health and safety person. So then with that, I then thought, right, okay, let's get an outside company in. I know what I'm doing, but I want someone to check my work, basically, because, you know, no one there to check my work. So they came in. I had to teach the health and safety company that I paid how to do things. So that taught me a massive lesson, never to doubt myself. And then I went on to, well, you know, the environment is massive, our environmental impact, investing in people and training. So I turned the head office into a training centre, and then I went and became a trainer. So I'm a qualified trainer. And then I looked at the sustainability side of things, and in London we had a real issue when Crossrail was being built with regards to the cyclists and vulnerable road users versus HGVs. Obviously the elephant was crushing the mouse, so to speak. So we needed to look at the vehicle and what we could do to improve that vehicle so that we weren't killing as many cyclists and vulnerable road users whilst driving around a very small, tight city. So I was paramount to changing what the cab looked like in a lorry. So that was quite exciting. And yes, I was the only woman that was sitting around that table. I'm very used to being the only woman sitting around the table, or being the only woman in the room of 20 men talking about logistics, trucks, safety. And I think the reason I'm probably pioneering in all of those areas is because I look at it totally different to how many in my industry look at it. I think they all look at the bottom line and think, oh no, oh, that's going to cost us a living fortune. We're not a PLC. It has to come off the bottom line. We can't afford it. So I suppose what I try to do for the industry is prove it can be done. We can be safer, we can be more efficient, and we can be sustainable. So I made a massive move in 2015. So what people would know as the standard dust cart that comes to your house to collect your wheelie bin rubbish. So the cab of that lorry, and I put a skip loader on the back of it. So I was the first to do that in the whole of Europe, not England, the whole of Europe. So no one had used a dust cart cab, which sits lower to the ground. It's got a 30% bigger windscreen, so the driver's got better visibility. And then the passenger door is like a bus door, so it's fully glazed. So the blind spots the driver had were massively reduced. So I was the first in Europe to do that in 2015. Now when I drive around London and I see every Tom, Dick and Harry has adopted these lorries to do all sorts of different things, it's like, I created that. You know, I turn this dust cart into different things. So yeah, I've had some amazing, I think amazing ideas that I have implemented, the industry have then followed.
Yeah, that's. Would you say that your strategy was trusting in the process rather than the outcome, to summarize it?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think you've got to have a cause. You know, and the cause for the vehicle safety was all the deaths that you know the construction industry was causing, thus giving us bad press. So we had to get over that. And then the process, and that process in here, yeah, was the success to what then became the finished article.
And then just keeping going on the topic of strategy, did that strategy have to kind of pivot at a time quite significantly? So for example, during COVID, were you able to keep everything up and running normally, or did you find there was a lot of challenges that you had to kind of deal with?
Yes, COVID, I think for a lot of people was a really worrying sort of time standing still a couple of seconds. It was like Boris has told us to go home. We were lucky enough to come under the required services, so we had to continue. So what we did was we continued probably on a third of the workforce. I implemented safety mechanisms. Drivers weren't allowed to approach different people. They're in the cab on their own, so they're isolated. They weren't to drop their paperwork in. They weren't to meet. We weren't allowed to cross contaminate desks, pick up people's pens. So, you know, very simple mechanisms, but very, very powerful, which enabled us to continue. And then what I found, which was very strange, and I didn't see it coming, was that the energy from waste plants that we have in the UK obviously can't be switched off. So where they were getting their feedstock from councils and commercial industrial resources, those office blocks had all closed and gone home. So they needed the feedstock. So they came to the likes of us, the smaller SME, to feed the burners so that they could keep the burners going and keep producing electricity. So for me, the numbers were fantastic. I could never have foreseen that that was going to be my best year in history, was when COVID hit. Anxiety of staff, oh my God. Some people I had to ring daily to check they're okay. Other people I had to ring weekly. But the thing I really noticed in COVID was the amount of men leaders in industry that knew me, that rang. I think where they were used to going down to the pub with the mates, with a couple of the, I don't know, office staff, having a few pints, relieving themselves of their pressures, their problems, they didn't have that outlet, so they didn't know how to cope. So I think an awful lot of men, and I'm not being sexist here, men found it very, very lonely being at the top of any industry during COVID. Whereas because I'm the only woman, I'm used to it. So I didn't find it lonely. I found that I was supporting other people that felt lonely, i.e. men, because they're not used to being the only one, whereas I'm always the only one.
Yeah, and to use how you're saying that you have to ring people daily or some people weekly. It's kind of the traits of a good leader is to know how to deal with their staff, and you can't treat everyone the same because no one is the same. So how do you approach that, and how do you kind of try to treat people differently but also on a level playing field?
I had to gauge it, how, when I had the conversations, I had to gauge how they felt. So one gentleman in particular I had to ring daily. He was an absolute nervous wreck. He was drinking at home far too much. He was waiting for the off license to open. So he had turned to drink because he didn't know what to do. Being at home wasn't something that he was in his 60s, wasn't something that he's ever done. So the anxiety of that was just putting him up the wall. So he turned to drink, really. So I had to ring him daily to reassure him that, it's going to get better, that this is happening, that's happening. And then I had a girl in particular, we would have, I don't know, we'd be during an announcement, and we set up WhatsApp groups. So I would communicate with people with WhatsApp groups. So her in particular, she would ask me to make sure that I was ready to watch the announcement, because I needed to put it into layman terms for the staff. They needed to have it from me, not from Boris, because they knew that because of the type of leader I am, that whatever I told them would be the facts, the truth, and in layman terms. So she needed that from me. It was irrelevant what Boris said to her. It was how I translated that further onto WhatsApp throughout the group. Then we had quite a young fellow in his late 30s get quite bad COVID, where he was hospitalised, and he was in hospital, then he got pneumonia, and I'd had to text him in the morning, at lunchtime, and at night time. He was suicidal. The thought of just lying there, no visitors, watching nothing but doom and gloom on TV. So he actually did say to me, if it wasn't for me communicating with him so often, and it was only a text, how'd you get on, what the doctors say, he said he couldn't have got through it. So yeah, I had to deal with an awful lot of different people in different ways. There was a couple of boys in the office so it was me, my sister, and two of the managers. The two managers said to me, we'd be divorced only for you allowing us to come to work during COVID. Because the thought of being at home with two young kids and a wife, when you've never done it for long periods of time. I mean, how the people in multi-story flats coped, I don't know.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're kind of one big family over there. And I think, recently you were acquired by Sortero, like one of the Europe's largest construction waste companies. So you're kind of joining another bigger family, as they say. So how has that process been for you, and how are you kind of finding it now, having a new partner?
The process was painful because not only were we hit by COVID on numerous occasions, I got COVID. We also got hit, my older brother and his wife was in a bad car accident, so that happened the whole way through the process. So the process was quite painful because it was extended way further than it should have been. How do I get on with them? Fine, they leave me to it. I've got a 12-month earnout, and that ends on the 31st of May. So obviously we're in discussions, they don't want to lose me. If I'm to be very bluntly honest, they don't get me, and they don't get me because I'm a woman, and it's, you know, they're from the Nordics. It's blatantly obvious that they don't get me. They don't get my sense of humour. They don't get my management style. They don't get that my biggest asset is the staff, not the land, not the lorries, not anything. The staff are and have always been my biggest asset. So they don't get me. They're just starting to get me, which is slow and odd. I feel, in some ways, I feel like I'm back at that 19-year-old girl stage where I have to convince them again that, because they just don't have women in that industry in the Nordics either. So yeah, they're struggling. They're struggling with having a woman at the helm.
And then you said you were kind of being left to run it on your own accord. So is the strategy kind of for the future going to be very much linked to kind of their strategy? I know that they do a lot in kind of terms of sustainability, or is it going to be you kind of Waste, O'Donovan Waste, kind of being a separate entity doing their own thing?
That, I don't think they've come to a conclusion on that, but we are miles ahead of them as a company on sustainability. We're miles ahead of any industry in the UK on sustainability in our sector. So yesterday we launched the Reuse Hub, where we're encouraging people to come and collect things. So we get an awful lot of the wooden wheels that keep the cable all wrapped around them. So people repurpose them for seats and tables. You know, you see them on the side of the road when they're putting down fibre optic cable, and they're massive wooden reels. So we've now launched the Reuse Hub, and anything that comes in that can be possibly reused, the door, those wooden reels, tires for keep fit. You know, you see people pushing the tires for assault courses, or using them as battens for go-kart tracks, things like that. So no one, as far as I know, we are the first to launch a Reuse Hub, where we're encouraging people to repurpose items that come in as waste, and then to put them up on our social media site to show other people what you can do with what is somebody else's waste, is somebody else's furniture.
So is that the future, do you think? So moving it towards not just related towards recycling and kind of reusing what you're using your experience to kind of go into the consumer market?
No, I don't want to go into the consumer market. I think it's a circular economy. The circular economy is never going to close until we close it. You know, everybody's, you know, so we're the first in the whole of the UK in our industry to go 100% road vehicle biofuel HVO, sustainably sourced. Now that is a massive commitment for me. So it went from 7p more expensive to 52p more expensive than diesel. So that was a massive commitment on my behalf, on the bottom line, in a year that I've got to hit targets to get my earn out. But I felt that we need, as businesses and as an entrepreneur, we all have to do our bit, because the world is changing. You know, it's quite evident that we've got global warming. It's quite evident that, you know, getting snow in March is not normal. Having hardly no rain in January is not normal. And I think that all businesses have to sit up, and business leaders from all industries have to sit up and do their bit. And I'm quite passionate about that, to the point where I'm, you know, slicing quite a percentage off my bottom line for the sake of it. But I feel that if I don't do it, then no one else is going to do it. And I'm not going to lie, I'm very upset that we've gone to Sharma, the chairman of COP26, for a statement, and he's refused to give a statement, because in COP27 his one ask was that they would all agree to no fossil fuels, and they didn't come away with that agreement. So here I am, a family business in the heart of London, using no fossil fuels on road going vehicles, and he won't support me with a statement. So I think it's very short-sighted of him. I think that for me to get it further than our trade press, I needed something like that. So we even went to Greta Thunberg, we couldn't get a comment from her, and then we went to Greenpeace and we couldn't get a comment. So I'm not knocked down, I'm not deflated. I will keep going until I get a comment, because if we're all to do something for the future generations, we've got to do something that is meaningful. And getting rid of fossil fuels for us as an industry is massive, because our biggest impact on the environment is our fuel.
Perfect. So is that kind of the direction now, in terms of your kind of purpose now for the next 5 to 10 years, is focused on sustainability?
No, not on, yes, but not on sustainability alone. I'm still looking at safety. I'm still looking at alternative vehicles for safety reasons and of the environment. Training is a massive area for me. I think the more trained the staff are, the better they do their role. So I suppose all of the aspects, when you're an entrepreneur, you can't take your eye off any ball. You've got to keep your eye on every ball, and every ball's got to be going in the air, and you've got to be juggling your balls as and when, and your plates have got to be spinning. And I suppose I think there's facts that most most entrepreneurs have got some element of ADHD, because I can't sit still. You know, I've got a million and one things going on in my head. I've got to do this, I've got to do that, you know, I've got to do this task, I've got to run that social media campaign. So all the research you did on me, and as a person, has come from me. So I've got a marketing director, so I will give her the skeleton, she'll put the meat on the bones, and then I'll cut fat off, and off we go. I haven't got a PR company. So yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, it's exciting.
And how important is that kind of image, getting your image out there? Because I think, yeah, as I said earlier, when you look up your name, I think you've probably done more to the industry than anyone could possibly imagine.
Yeah, well, I have done an awful lot for the industry, and I think it's really important that the industry, I suppose my task with the industry was dragging it out of the 20th century into the 21st century. You know, so many and predominantly as Irish families that run waste companies, construction companies. You know, the Irish that built Britain is a book. You know, MacAlpine's Men, they talk about that in history. So I think it's very important that I feel like I'm a bit like the mother hen. I have to do it, show them that I can do it as an SME. I'm not a PLC. I haven't got a massive pot for health and safety. I haven't got a massive pot for training. I haven't got massive budgets here, there, and everywhere. I've got to do what I've got to do on a shoestring, but I still manage to do it. And that is it for me. It's being able to convince people of that. So we are based head office. I'm speaking from Tottenham, and further up the road there used to be a pub. Pub got knocked down, built a block of flats. The third flat, he calls it a penthouse, and it's right where the lorries come out in the morning. So of course I'm getting phone call after phone call. Oh, your lorries, the noise your lorries are making, da da da. No disrespect. Number one, you should have looked at where you were buying your penthouse. Number two, leave it with me. So we went about looking at the vehicle. So the biggest impact on noise that a skip lorry makes is the chains that hold the skip on to the empty skip, the metal to metal. That was the biggest noise. So we got a decibel reader, and we did it from different distances, and for full skips, empty skips, multiple skips, and we worked out and we designed a very simple, probably about this long, padded, it's probably about this wide, padded, 100% recyclable Velcro's wrap for the chain. So the Velcro's, the padding is hitting the empty skip or the full skip. We reduced our noise impact by 23%. So I have shared that. Noise Abatement Society gave us a quote that we use that quote when we done our press release, and we do case studies. Something as simple as that. They were £78.10p for a set of 4, and they last 18 months. No brainer. Complaints are down. The impact of noise is down by 23%. Everybody happy. So yeah, it's little things like that. Yeah, it's little things like that that I enjoy. And I suppose it's thinking outside the box is what it is, and that's what I truly believe entrepreneurs do.
Perfect. I think that kind of gets us named before quick fire brains. There's one final question. How important is legacy to you?
Legacy, I suppose, it is important. History is more important for me. Legacy is important, but not as important as history. I didn't have a choice in this job. Now, don't get me wrong, it's given me the lifestyle that I've got, and it's afforded me to do things that maybe as a child minder I would never have been able to do. But for my son, I wanted to give him choice. He can choose what he wants to do as a career. You mean my older brother? Yeah, the farm was always left to the eldest. Is the the Irish way, and that was what all three of us, the 3 younger ones of us, thought, that the older brother was going to just take it and run. We were all going to get jobs. We didn't get the chance. None of us had. My brother was married 3 weeks. It was a case of right, all hands to the pump, and we all came into the business. And I think it's very unusual to find a family that not only socialize together, live within miles of each other, and work together, and have done harmoniously for 39 years. So yeah, it's really important.
That's perfect. So we'll just wrap up with just a few quick fire questions.
Yeah.
So 3 skills that will be required in the future.
The ability to make a decision, common sense, which isn't common, and maths is really important.
Perfect. And then number 2, a startup to watch in the next few years.
I think these food companies that are delivering your dinner that you just fire into a pan and it happens in minutes. I think that's something to watch out for.
Perfect. And then describe high performance in no more than 3 words.
High performance, dedication, passion, and belief.
Who is someone you look up to and why?
I looked up to my dad because of what he achieved, and I haven't looked up to anybody since he passed away.
And then last but not least, what advice would you give your 19-year-old self?
There is no glass ceiling, sky's the limit. Don't doubt your instinct and go with your gut.
Perfect. I think that wraps up today's speaker series. So thank you very much for joining us, and until next time, maybe we'll leave it there.
Lovely. Thanks very much.